Welcome, Wargamers. Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and today I'm going to be doing a bit of a comparison between some of the army books that Games Workshop puts out for their games. Now, essentially, the idea behind this is I have always thought for the longest time that the Battle Tome is the perfect example of what this hobby is. That is to say, it has rules and in-depth lore and the Path to Glory system if you want to make a little background for your dude. You have, obviously, the painting section, which is huge to me, the painting tutorial section, and then seeing the models painted and all that stuff. I really do love battle tomes, and one of the things I've always said, at least for a long time, is that they are so much better than these. This is the Chaos Demons Codex for 40k, and what we're going to do is move to the downward cam. I'm going to show you the differences, but the reason I'm highlighting this is because Games Workshop was kind enough to send me one of these, which is the brand new codex design. All codexes going forward are going to have this sort of design idea behind them, and I gotta tell you, these two books, night and day different. I love it, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. So here at the downward cam, I'm going to show you exactly why I think this is so amazing. Okay, this is obviously a Age of Sigmar battle tome. You have tons of expressive art. Lots of stuff about how forces are organized and managed, and at the same time that the Maggotkin of Nurgle battle tome dropped, they dropped the Demons Codex. Okay, and I haven't really done a review of this because, frankly, I don't like being negative. When it comes to teaching a player about the setting of 40k and this faction in context of that setting, the battle tome nails it. Okay, it talks about the mortal realms, the corrupting forces coming in. You get a vague sense of the overarching story. I mean, this was actually the first of the second edition battle tome, so it's kind of missing some of the newer details, but it'll get those when they gets updated. But it tells you about some sub-factions and some cool, flavorful things. Obviously, it goes through the units. It gives you pretty good, like at least 2 paragraphs to everything. And my favorite, the thing that I'm always a sucker for, is these painted models and, of course, the painting tutorials, which now suddenly, of course, I cannot seem to find. There we go. I actually value these a lot. Seeing how color changes with different washes and that kind of thing is invaluable to me because I do not have an eye for color, or the color wheel, I should say, specifically. So seeing different combinations is a huge bonus to me. Now, we compare that to this, and I understand. When I've said this before, I haven't done it in an actual formal video, but during a live stream, someone pointed out that, well, this is the Demons book, it's not the Maggotkin book, so of course it doesn't go into as much detail for Nurgle. That's fair. That's only 1/4 of the book. However, I would contend that it doesn't go into a whole lot of detail about, 40k, or even really, I don't know, any of the gods. The units barely have any information on them, so I couldn't just go learn about Horticulus Slimex, and basically it just says he's grumpy. The only map we get is this, where it basically highlights all of the warp storms in 40k, which is where demons pour out of. So it's cool, but it's very, very dry. It's very surface level. These are not written with if I'm going to be honest with you, lore in mind. This is all about rules, in my opinion. Now, one thing that both books have is a timeline, right? Nurgle has the Maggotkin of Nurgle book has the not-so timeline is what I call it, where basically it's a series of events, but there's no actually year on them. It's just a bunch of stuff that Nurgle has done in the mortal realms. Whereas 40k has had this for as long as I've known this hobby, where there's some kind of timeline, right? Millennium 34 through 36, and they go through the explanations of what happened in those millenniums. So hopefully more happened, in 2 millennia than just these 1, 2, 3, 4 things. It's also kind of awkward because demons, by definition, don't have a sense of time because the warp is outside of time. So it's just kind of an odd thing. But it's just a listing of events. Again, there's not a ton of lore for each individual unit. Not a lot of ways to list build with them in terms of creating like a flavorful army. They don't really, I don't think, give a good example of what a flavorful Nurgle army looks like. Because that's just a start collecting box with Horticulus. That's a start collecting box, you get the idea. it's kind of dry. And then it goes straight into rules and points and all of that. Yeah, and so when I got this book originally, I was somewhat disappointed. It's also a little bit kind of a lore jarring thing because it's demons, period. It's all the chaos stuff. However, in the lore within the game, much like Age of Sigmar, these guys all freaking hate each other. And so it's just kind of like a weird thing of like, oh yeah, we're on the same side now. Which does happen. It's just, it has to be a huge incursion for them to all get on the same page. So, what we're going to do now is I want to show you what 40k and Age of Sigmar could be like. Oh, and I want to be clear, they sent me the Necrons and the Space Marine book, but I chose to focus on the Necron one for this review, strictly because the Space Marine Codex has so much to cover because Space Marines are so huge. They all have these little supplements for all their different chapters. So I kind of wanted to pick a singular book. This is a Xenos faction, Alien faction, where they have to kind of explain it from scratch and there's no other supplements for them rules-wise. So that's what I was doing. Because the Space Marine one is also kind of dry, but that's because they assume you're going to pick a chapter and kind of dive in there. Now, I read this thing cover to cover, okay? Straight up. I basically read it, and I had the 40k wiki pulled up, and I was comparing the information. My question is, how much of the lore do they actually tell? How well do they tell it compared to what's in other books? I do have the old Necron Codex because I went to like Half Price Books and grabbed it. I packed it up like a dingus by now. But anyway, so we're looking at this and they give you a sense of their history. It's told in a very eloquent and simple way. Like you don't have to know all the details and mechanics of the universe. It just introduces you to the faction, I think, in a very fluid and smooth way. Then it kind of, talks about their technology. And one thing, and I'll point it out here, but it happens a lot in this book, and I freaking love this. They completely cut the timeline, okay? Like let me just quadruple check, but there's absolutely no like definitive timeline that goes by millennia in this book, and I did not see one in the Space Marines book either. The reason for that is instead of focusing on specific points in history, they're moving, I think, subtly away from having a chronological order, kind of breaking up some of that, I don't know what the word is, like, I guess, canon that was there. I mean, kind of moving away from strict canon, I suppose, into more of a broad one. How they're doing that, though, is by war zone. They have these little stories, and there's a couple of them in this book that are like, hey, listen, here's what it looks like when Necrons attack a planet. And it's just a planet, boom, it's Amon-Tep 2, and all these little things are just informational facts that are cool. They highlight units, but they highlight them in context, right? It's not just like a this lord woke up and he had a whole bunch of destroyers, which is kind of what most of the timeline stories are from the old codexes, where it's just like, cool, I'm going to take that narrative lead of a guy with a bunch of destroyers and have a destroyer-filled army, which is cool. It's flavorful, technically, but there's not a lot of story behind it. Whereas this, you get a full story of an assault on a planet, and then you see these units in context of how that happens. And when you combine all these little Warzone stories, you get a really great picture of what a Necron attack or invasion is like. And I love it. Because when I talk about Age of Sigmar lore, one of the things that I try to do with my videos, specifically, and this is very targeted, and when I write my scripts, is it's not enough to just know the faction. It's not enough to know the facts, right? Otherwise, you're just reading a Wikipedia. But you have to put them in context of the setting. And I feel like this book, and also the Space Marine one, because they did also have the Warzone things, does that so much better than the 8th edition wave of codexes. That's a huge deal for me, because lore, honestly, and storytelling and that kind of stuff is what really drives me into miniature games. And so the fact that 40k has, I think, turned a corner into doing that, and with the support of things like Crusade, which is their campaign narrative format, I'm just floored. Like, I really am. Like I said, I have no interest in playing Necrons, but it makes me excited for the factions that are coming out because I want to know their stories. I want to know how they fit into the universe. So, man, y'all are killing it. I just love it. It gives you information about their tomb worlds. This is really cool. So, remember that map I showed you of like all the different warp rifts? This is the same map, but they don't give a crap about that. So this is all their little like empires, mini empires all across the place. And there's just this little dot that's like, oh yeah, there's Earth, because in their minds, from their perspective, it's just a speck of dust. Who cares, right? The Necron map is awesome. So I like that we were just this little boop. So yeah, and then it goes more into the dynasties, which are, it's their word for like chapter or stormhost or something like that. They do a great job there, give you some sense of what they're each about. And I just wanted to say, there's also a little short story in here too. You have a full page spread on some of these heroes. Necrons do have some of the best heroes. I will not lie with you. They decided not to put a painting tutorial section in, which I think is a shame. But I get it. 40k, these books are already packed to the gills with stuff in terms of like, their war scroll equivalents or whatever you want to call them. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think the painting thing is a nice to have for new folks getting into the hobby, but it's not the end of the world they didn't have it. So they have here a little list, and I like it because they break the organization of this book down the same way that you would look for rules like in the main rulebook. So how do you make a battle-forged army, right? What abilities do you get, like the stratagems? Army rules. Okay, let's talk about what this thing can do, right? What do I get for playing Necrons? And then it breaks you down to match play, it is match play, but generally speaking more competitive. Crusade would be the more narrative thing. And then it just goes down into profiles and points. Now, I love this format because you can just very easily, if you just bookmark this page, you can find anything you're looking for. And for the data sheets, here we go. It's their War Scroll equivalent. They changed the format of how they're presented, and this is also in the Space Marines book. It used to just be like a block of text. Now they've put the model right there, so you know exactly what you're looking at. Everything is nice and sized. These could be War Scroll cards if they wanted to print them out. I don't know why they haven't yet, but yeah, I like it. Everything seems very easy to reference and to find, which was honestly my problem when I tried getting into 40k before, is I would just spend all my time looking around this freaking book, not sure where anything is. So, and everything's just really, really easy to read, and it's easier to find. And yeah, I want to go ahead and just close this one out, but kind of give my closing thoughts. So why am I talking about this? Well, the truth is, 40k has been an interesting thing. It's actually one of the first Games Workshop products I'd ever bought with my own money as an adult. I did actually, funny enough, buy Necrons like several years ago, right before we moved out here. But then fantasy caught my eye and I started diving into that. What I will say is that typically, when I started playing in 7th edition, the game was far too complex for me. Like by the time I absorbed the rule set, the game was already kind of fading on its way out. People were getting kind of disgruntled, and we were excited for 8th. 8th edition came out, and every faction got a codex in a year, which is phenomenal. It's an incredible breakneck speed. But the problem was those really did feel like rule supplements. They felt like rule books. They didn't feel like army books, where you get excited about the faction and you get a picture of the universe from their perspective, but also it puts them in context of the setting. I didn't feel like they really did that well. However, with these, again, I can't speak for all the ones that are going to come out in the next couple years. I can only speak about the ones that I actually have read. I love it. I love moving away from the timeline and giving us specific war zones where we get to see these things in context. There's good lore on each and every one of the units, certainly more for the heroes and the named characters, but that makes sense. Those are characters you want to get excited about. The Crusade rules I talked about in my other video comparing Path to Glory to Crusade. They're just awesome. They let you build very flavorful forces. And overall, I like the direction 40k is headed. When I move over to Iowa, which I'm kind of doing right now at the time of you're watching this, I do intend to play more 40k. I do intend to talk about the lore now that it's not dry as toast. And kind of dive into it. It is an exciting universe. So much of what I read comes from army books and codexes and battle tomes and all that kind of stuff, that having the battle tomes for an entire year be very, very dry and minimal on information and putting factions in context, it was really rough. So I'm excited to jump into that a bit more. I hope that you'll join me for those videos as we go here on the channel. Actually, we'll probably start with Necrons from a lore perspective, if I'm honest with you, and we'll go from there. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the new 40k codexes. Are you interested in them at all? Did anything in this that I showed you kind of like change your opinion? A lot of it, again, has taken my word for it when it comes to things are written better. I really do think they are. Like they're written for someone who has no idea about 40k, and takes you to some pretty deep places, sets you up to ask great questions about the background of these factions, and you can't ask for more than that. It just promotes engagement of the community for helping each other, asking questions and getting answers, that kind of thing. So I like it. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Leave in the comments down below, and I'll check you out there. Thank you all so much for watching. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.